Content is the highest form of leverage of our generation, and you can use content to build community. So how could we build a tech product to serve our community? As much as I hate LinkedIn, like I've built everything off of LinkedIn. I just start posting 100,000 views here, 100,000 views here. And I'm just shit posting on LinkedIn, talking mad shit. This is back before like LinkedIn wasn't sophisticated. People are like, who the is this guy and why is he posting this on LinkedIn? This video goes viral, super viral.
So you have to evolve or you're gonna fucking die.
I met Toby Rice, CEO of EQT, largest nat gas producer in the world. I walk in, he's like, dude, that shit inspired me, bro. Roughnecking is probably the most labor intensive, dangerous job in the United States, if not the world.
How'd you quit?
If I was on my deathbed and I didn't quit to pursue my dream of building companies, I would live with a life of regret, and I wasn't willing to be on my deathbed having that regret. Curiosity is the most important thing in life. I built this one account, it was called Words of Success, built it to 300,000 followers, and it was like really cringy business motivation memes. That content hit back then. It was selling ads to people like Gary Vaynerchuk. So that was my first taste of creating content and then monetizing it. I think storytelling is the most important thing in the world. Doesn't matter if you're a business and a company, doesn't matter if you're an individual, everything comes down to storytelling. The simpler I made my story, the more money I raised. My biggest piece of advice when it comes to storytelling is...
All right, man. You're back in the podcast, game 3 podcast in 3 days.
I know, dude. I haven't recorded a podcast in 10 months and maybe almost a year. And I've done 3 in the last few days.
Hey, man, well, it's an honor to be in the run up.
Yeah, it's like, dude, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna record with Rory, the legend himself.
Let's go,
dude. I like your shirt. You're double repping here. Midnight this. Marketing and Collide.
Yeah, that's well. We need to see the back.
It's like, how can we kill 2 birds with one stone? Then the future of energy. That is sick. Yeah, I like that.
Man, there's a lot of threads I want to go through. First off, Roughnecking in the oil field before we started Digital Wildcatters and Collide.
Yeah,
I think you were probably the first person to ever build like a social media community for oil and gas, which is kind of wild. And I want to talk more about storytelling within oil and gas because it's just, no one was doing it back then in 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
But first off, you've had a crazy journey, man, roughnecking in the oil field, spending years growing up in Midland. So I want to start off with just like, what was life growing up?
Yeah.
Growing up in Midland and then...
I'll actually, I want to comment, like, I don't know if we're the first ones to build community in oil and gas, and we can go back to this later and talk about it more in depth because this industry has had professional societies like Society of Petroleum Engineers for a long time. I mean, they've been around for over 100 years, but the way that community is built and engaged today is completely different. And you want to actually know what I take pride in being the first to do in oil and gas is I made the first video meme ever, the first oil and gas video meme ever in 2013 on Vine, and it went viral. Yeah,
before TikTok.
Yeah, dude, if you want, you can ask Jacob to cut it in here and splice it in. A lot of people haven't seen it. I'm like super like it's cringy, but it was the first viral oil and gas video meme ever. And
what was
it? So I'm like sitting there. I'm working somewhere down in South Texas, down in the Eagle Ford.
Yeah,
and I'm sitting there. And I'm like laying on my accent, my West Texas accent, really thick, and I'm like all these boys want to come work out in the oil field, and it's like 100-hour work weeks, freezing rain, hot sun. It's like, you boys ain't about that life. And then I had this really long lollipop, and I looked at lollipop after, and it was like, I was like talking shit about field hands, like how field hands like act like they're so tough, and then they're actually like really soft. And anyways, dude, it goes so viral, like across Facebook. And this is back in the Vine days. And so that's actually like what I'm really proud of doing. Like the first oil and gas thing was making the first oil and gas meme. But yeah, growing up, so I grew up in West Texas, graduated high school from Lee High School in 2008. And barely graduated. I graduated with a 1.6 GPA. So really the only reason I graduated is just because I got too much riz and I talked to the counselors and the principal and to literally graduate. But always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur from really young age. I'm talking 7 years old. And in high school, the reason that I nearly flunked out was because I was so fascinated by the internet. And this is early mid 2000s, right? And I was specifically interested in e-commerce. So this is before Shopify existed, really before people were ordering things on Amazon like they do today. There was just not a lot of infrastructure around e-commerce, and like most of the volume of e-commerce was coming through eBay. And so like I had books, just books on eBay, and I would spend so much time reading about eBay. And anyways, that's what I was interested in, was e-commerce and building websites around commerce. And anyways, I graduated high school in 2008 and knew I didn't want to go to college. That wasn't in the cards for me. Knew I didn't want to do that. Actually, I did go to college for like 2 weeks. I went to Odessa College for diesel mechanics, and like 2 weeks in, right, like the day before you could get out and get a refund, like I quit. I was like, dude, what the hell am I doing? I'm not doing this. I'm not paying for this. Yeah. And so I was interested in being a diesel mechanic. But anyways, I'm at Gold's Gym one day working out, and I run into a buddy from high school, and he's like, man, I'm roughnecking for Savannah Drilling, and I'm making $80,000 a year. And dude, we were 18, 19 years old. And this is back in 2010. Like $80,000 was a lot of money back then, especially to us. And I was like, what the fuck, man? I was like, I need to get out on a rig. And so long story short, I end up getting on this rig for Savannah. So Savannah was actually a Canadian company, moved all the rigs down from Alberta to West Texas. And the only reason that I got hired, mind you, this is in the 2008 to 2010 downturn. So there were all these people sitting on the sidelines out of work, really seasoned, experienced field hands that were out of work. And they hired me because they hated West Texas hands, and they wanted to find new people that they could train up the Canadian way. And so that's the only reason that I got a job. And, I remember I meet one of my dad's friends. His name was Brady. I owe a ton to Brady because he's like, hey, I think I can help you out, get out on a rig. He's like, meet me at this post office off 1788 in Midland. It's out like in the middle of nowhere by the airport. And I meet him out there because he was making some hot shot runs. He's like, hey, there's this company, Savannah. I know one of the drilling superintendents. He's like, I think that, you should go talk to him. And so he introduces me, and I go out to Odessa. I go out to the yard, and I meet this guy. And mind you, dude, I look like I'm 12, first off. Like I've got a baby face.
How old were you back then?
I was 19. Yeah, like I wasn't that much older than 12, to be honest. Yeah. Now that I think about it, but
no Fracslap beard, yeah.
No beard at all, no facial hair at all. Like, dude, I looked like a baby. And I walk into this office, and they're like, all right, we're gonna give you a shot. They're like, typically we gotta wait for someone to get ran off of a rig. They'll get run off, and we'll give you a call. So it'll probably be like a week or two. And I was like, okay, cool. And I go home that day, and they call me at like 4:00, and they're like, hey, you're going out tonight. And you go get some boots and gloves. And I'm like, oh shit, dude. Like, I'm nervous, like so nervous. And I go and buy me some gloves, and I call my stepdad. My stepdad worked in the oil field for like 30 years. I'm like, hey, where do I get gloves at? And he's like, go to a gas station, you can find some cotton gloves. So I get some, and they give me directions out to the rig. I get lost. I can't find the rig. And I finally pull up to the rig. And I remember pulling up to location, and I just, I get out because I showed up like an hour early, and I let my tailgate down. I sit on my tailgate, and I'm just like looking up at the top of this rig all the way up to the crown, and just being nervous, like sick to my stomach. Like all I'd ever heard was how hard roughnecking was, and how dangerous it was. And so I was scared. And I walk into the tool pusher's shack, and I walk in, and he looks me up and down. He's like, that's what you're wearing out here? And I had jeans on and a white t-shirt. And he's like, that's way too nice. He's like, you're going to tear that shit up. He's like, here's a pair of pants. And he gave me some pants. This is back before we had to wear coveralls. And anyways, yeah. And so I go out there, and these guys hazed the fuck out of me, dude. I mean, bullied me, like straight up bullied me. And it was a lot of painful growth lessons. And for me, like I wasn't mechanically inclined. Like I didn't know what a pipe wrench was, much less how to work one. I was a kid that liked technology and math and science. And here I am, all of a sudden working tongs on a rig floor and tripping pipe and mixing mud. And it was really a very steep learning curve and a quick accelerated learning curve for me to start gaining mechanical skills to work on a rig. And so always like really thankful for that, I got to learn the business from the ground up. I'd be out there all day, every day, either tripping pipe or scrubbing my rig, just thinking about the unit economics of drilling a well, and just became fascinated with oil and gas. That day that I walked into my tool pusher shack, he gives me those clothes and he walks me out. He looks at me and he tells me verbatim, he's like, dude, this shit sucks. He's like, but oil, it gets in your blood. And he was right, man. It got in my blood and I loved it. 6 months in, I started really getting an appreciation for the business, and the rest is history from there.
Wow. What is roughnecking for like the average listener out there who has no idea about oil and gas and just dumbed down?
Yeah, roughnecking is probably the most labor intensive, dangerous job in the United States, if not the world. And what it is you have a drilling rig that goes out to drill an oil well. And so your drilling rig's, a really tall structure, and you go out there, and anyways, the roughnecks are the guys that work on that drilling rig. And so they do a multitude of things. The primary thing that they do is drill the well, but there's a million things that go into drilling a well. Right. You got to bring up your drill pipe and make connections of drill pipe, and, you'll drill, 30 feet by 30 feet. And so you're the guys that, if you'll see these viral roughnecking videos going around where, they're making connections of drill pipe, and, they're throwing chain and working their tongs. And that's what a roughneck is. And then you're doing things like maintenance around the rig, fixing pumps, you're mixing drilling mud. But yeah, that's what it is, we worked roughly 100 hours a week. We worked four-week towers. So we'd work 2 weeks on day shift, and then you'd switch to 2 weeks on night shift, and then you'd get 2 weeks off. And I was such a degenerate back then that I'd work all my days off too. Like there was one time I worked 16 weeks straight, 100-hour weeks of roughnecking. Like I was just young kid just getting it. And, this was at the beginning of the American Shale Revolution, which just changed global politics and really the balance of power around the world, because instead of OPEC holding all the power with oil, all of a sudden the United States becomes the largest producer of oil and gas. And it's because you had a bunch of
energy independence, right?
Yeah. You had a bunch of just psychotic, degenerate cowboys like me out in West Texas getting after it, producing oil. And that fueled the greatest economic boom that the United States has ever seen over the last 20 years. And so, and I was proud of that. And so, the industry and the nation was built on the back of a lot of roughnecks and field hands like myself.
I think it's a shame that people don't give them enough credit. Like, police officers and a lot of like industries are celebrated, but roughnecks, the oil and gas industry's had just such a terrible reputation. And guys are out there in minus 40 degree cold, or like in West Texas heat, in the middle of the desert,
away from their families for a long time. There's times that I'd be offshore for 30 to 60 days at a time away from my kids. I'd come home and my kids were completely different people than when I left, because they were growing so quickly in that time frame. And it's also, like I said, just a dangerous job too. And sometimes people don't come home. And so, but it's easy to get upset that the world doesn't appreciate these types of jobs or this industry, but I don't hold it against them either, because they're just ignorant. They don't have any exposure to the industry. They don't know what it's about. They don't know the amount of work that goes into it. And so you can't fault someone for not appreciating something that they've never even been exposed to.
Right.
And so, like I always think about I think about a kid that grows up in New York City. Like, why would they know anything about oil and gas or the oil field? Like, they didn't have no reason to. But this is where the power of social media comes in, is like you see these videos going viral on TikTok and Instagram of oil field workers. And, it's been the best thing that's happened to the industry in terms of storytelling and narrative, because people are interested in the work that we do. They just need a interesting medium to consume content and learn about it.
Yeah, it just needs more education and knowledge gap. And I think that brings us on to 2018. You left your job as a project manager in the oil field.
Yeah.
And during an industry downturn, you decided I want to start a media company.
No, that's not what I decided to start. I just happened to start that. I started and I quit my job, and my boss is like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't have a fucking clue, but I'm going to figure out something. I just got promoted a month before at my job. And I was like, man, I'm getting too deep into this. Like I was making good money at that time. You know, I was 28 years old and making good money. And
Why did you quit?
because I look at things through a lens of if I was on my deathbed and I didn't quit to pursue my dream of building companies, I would live with a life of regret. And I wasn't willing to be on my deathbed having that regret. And so it was easy to make a decision to do that. And I remember at the time, you know, I had 3 young kids and single income. And I remember Julie telling me, she's like, quit being a pussy and do it. And I was like, hell yeah.
Shout out to
and
Julie.
So shout out to Julie. And we did it. And when I quit, I was actually interested in cryptocurrency. And I'd been spending time in LA and Hollywood. And this was like in 2016 to 2018, there was this ICO craze, initial coin offering.
Yeah.
And today people call them NFTs. But this was the first wave, and people were doing these capital raises around cryptocurrency to start platforms, and much of it was a scam and sometimes fraudulent. But the concept is really interesting to me. And I developed this thesis around tokenizing oil and gas assets. And I laid out this thesis that there was going to be a liquidity crunch in oil and gas where private equity money was going to dry up. Oil and gas producers were going to need access to capital, but there was going to be no institutional capital. But then you'd have all of these high net worth individuals and family offices around the world that wanted to invest, have direct exposure to these oil and gas assets. And so my idea was to create a security token platform where oil and gas companies could tokenize their assets, and then investors around the world could invest in those assets. And I was way too early to that idea, and also just didn't have clarity in my vision, and so wasn't successful in raising capital for it. And anyways, I started a podcast called the Oil and Gas Startups Podcast in that time, because I saw that, you know, when I moved to Houston, I didn't know anyone here. I'd never been to Houston before I moved here. And so I was trying to make friends, and I was like, where could I go to make friends? And I discovered LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like I can just look up people that work at companies. And I found that I would message them and they would just answer me. And I was like, oh, this is crazy. And so through that, I met a couple guys, and they were working on oil and gas startups. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Because dude, I'll be honest, I was actually looking at getting out of the industry then. I was hell-bent on buying a trash recycling company. Yeah. Like,
dude, they crush.
Dude, they crush. Yeah. And I was obsessed with that idea. But then I started seeing what was happening in these tech startups, and I was like, oh, this is actually super interesting. And if you looked at the oil and gas industry, you had what was called the Great Crew Change. And we had this bimodal distribution of age in the workforce. You had boomers and millennials, and you didn't have a lot of Gen X in between. And the reason that you didn't have Gen X in the industry was because there was a downturn in the 1980s. They just didn't get into the industry. And so that Great Crew Change led to a few things. And a couple of those things was the cultural dynamic. This industry was just stuffy. It was a bunch of old dudes in suits, and all the events were at hotel conference centers, and it was just boring. And you would contrast that to like Silicon Valley and tech; it looked the complete opposite. And then you looked at the software. All the software in this industry was legacy software that was developed in the 90s and early 2000s, while the tech industry is just building all this cool SaaS. And so that really opened up the opportunity where these people from the industry were trying to build these SaaS solutions. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to create a podcast on this. And I had, the podcast is called Oil and Gas Startups. It's hyper niche. Didn't know if anyone would listen to it. But I thought, hey, at minimum, even if no one listens to it, I'll get cool people in the room with me, and I'll build my network, and I'll build friends. Like I'll make friends. And so that was my selfish intention for it. Anyways, it ended up becoming a really tangible platform quickly, where oil and gas companies would come to our show for technological discovery to hear about what's out there. And startups would come on our show and land $1 million pilot from one of our listeners. And so off that, we just built this really deeply engaged community of young oil and gas professionals that wanted to change the culture of the industry. And we just kept parlaying that into more podcasts and more events. And, it's like the comment that you made, it's like you quit your job to start this media company. It's like, no, I accidentally built a media company. I didn't set off to do that. I didn't quit my job. It's like, I'm building this media company.
Yeah.
It just became that way. And actually, I think that's how the best companies are built, is it starts off with a project, something that you're interested in and you're building for yourself, really. And if you build for yourself, hey, there's got to be other people out there that want what you're building. And yeah, and so that's how we really organically built the community and the media platform.
I think organically, though, the question still remains, like, why did you feel the curiosity, and were you compelled to create content and be the person to have that storytelling around energy and oil and gas? Because like you said, there are other people kind of doing it in different formats, but not in the same way with like the new wave of the internet around this time.
Yeah. I am a child of the internet. And I think that I have deep understanding and nuance of the internet. And you look at people that are my age, we're really kind of the last ones that remember life before the internet and then really grew up natively in the internet. And so I've been a shit poster all my life, you know, and you look at, let's talk about the evolution of the internet real quick, because I think this is important.
Yep.
If you look at Web 1 is really static websites and listings.
HTML.
Yeah. And so think like Craigslist. Think about, you know, messaging forums or like, you know, AOL Instant Messenger, or like any old school forum. Like that was Web 1. Then Web 2 is actually coined by LinkedIn in their Series B investment deck. And what Web 2 was horizontal social media platforms that connected everyone around the world and allowed us to be able to create content, to become content creators. So think MySpace, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, all the big social media platforms. And around 2014, you know, this was kind of prime rise in Instagram. And I saw Instagram on the rise, and I saw these people creating these accounts. And I don't like to tell this story because I'm always embarrassed of it, but it is actually kind of important for my story. Is I paid this guy as a consultant, and he started teaching me how to build Instagram accounts. And Julie and I built this one account. It was called Words of Success, built it to 300,000 followers. And it was like really cringy business motivation memes. But that content hit back then, and was selling ads to people like Gary Vaynerchuk, direct to consumer brands. And so that was my first taste of creating content and then monetizing it. And then I sold that account for Bitcoin. So it's like the most millennial thing ever for me, is like creating an Instagram account and selling it for Bitcoin. And what happened is 2017 comes around, there was an oil and gas startup, and one of the guys there knew me and they needed marketing help. And they're like, hey, he's like, I've got this friend Collin, he's built up social media profiles, we should talk to him. And so I went and talked to him. I'm like, yeah, you know, let me survey the market, and like, we need to find who are the influencers in oil and gas. I went and looked, there wasn't a single fucking person creating content in oil and gas, not a single one. Zero. And my eyes lit up. And I was like, there is a wide open lane here. So where do you go to create content when nothing exists? I go to LinkedIn. And mind you, this is back in 2017. This is before people were using LinkedIn as a social media platform. Like, it was very much a
job announcement. Like,
it was a business platform and professional network. And one of my very first posts is a really poorly photoshopped picture of me riding Blastoise out to an offshore rig, and I post it. And there's still people that like tell me about that. They're like, dude, I'll never forget when you posted that, because people are like, who the fuck is this guy? And why is he posting this on LinkedIn? And anyways, I just start posting 100,000 views here, 100,000 views here. It's like taking candy from a baby. And I'm just shit posting on LinkedIn. And I mean, talking mad shit. This is back before like LinkedIn wasn't sophisticated. So they didn't have filters like on cussing. So I'm like just shitting on people on LinkedIn. And the first, like the piece of content that really put me on the map is I'm in Denver at Union Station, and I'm walking to Snooze AM to get some breakfast. And I just pull out my phone and I just start recording myself. And I talk about how the industry has to start adopting new technology, and it has to evolve or die. This video goes viral, super viral. And I mean, viral to the point when, you know, I met Toby Rice, CEO of EQT, largest nat gas producer in the world. I walk in, he's like, dude, he's like, several years back when you made that video, Evolve or Die, that shit inspired me, bro. And that Evolve or Die neon sign that we have around,
I remember
that's a gift. That's a gift.
Yeah.
That's a gift from Toby. He got that for us. And so that was like the piece of content that put us on the map. And anyway, so I started building up that following on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Then I used that following on LinkedIn to parlay into the podcast and
Right.
get views on the podcast. And then that just started feeding each other. And then Twitter starts. You know, I've been on Twitter for a long time. There was no one on oil and gas on Twitter. And I can't even tell you how I found these guys, but one day this guy called Mr. Skilling follows me. And I was like, what the fuck? Because I'd actually just met the real Jeff Skilling from Enron. And I was like, that's weird that this Mr. Skilling account followed me a day after I met the real Jeff Skilling. And I start following him, and I have like 10 followers at this point, okay? So I have no clue, and I don't know who Mr. Skilling is. Like,
Did oil and gas Twitter exist?
no,
at this
it
point?
didn't exist. But it was Mr. Skilling and like 4 other guys that would talk oil and gas.
That was it.
That was it. And I start talking to them. And then what my podcast became is, like, on my podcast, I'd always open up my podcast and like I talked to Jake about this thing called EFT and like what people were saying.
Right.
And so through the podcast, started driving all these people to Twitter, to the EFT community. And then that started growing. And now, I mean, Twitter's probably the most powerful platform I've ever built on, and have a pretty sizable following there now. And so it's just been crazy to see, like,
the flywheel.
yeah, the flywheel in effect. And you know, that's, I think in terms of flywheels, and you see this growth, this compound. But as much as I hate LinkedIn, like, I've built everything off of LinkedIn. It started when with those small posts on there, and then just were able to parlay that into other mediums and formats.
I think it's very interesting. Like, you start off creating content about something you're curious about, and then eventually that snowballs and compounds into a community.
Yeah.
And then over time, the more value you provide to that community, that evolution turns into a product that they need, and you can sell into that.
Yeah,
community.
you know.
And I think as well, the whole evolve or die philosophy that Collide has is a very interesting thread to pull on, to talk about how Collide, well, first off, was born, and like how it's evolved into AI enterprise now today.
I think what you mentioned about curiosity is the most important thing in life. I mean, this is the number one thing that I beat into my kid's head, is that you have to remain curious. This is how you discover opportunities. Technology is just having infinite curiosity. And so with Collide, you know, 2020 happens and it almost killed our business. I put everything I had into this business, maxed out my credit cards, every dollar I had, and committed financial suicide to keep the business alive. And I wrote out this flywheel, and I was like, okay, content is the highest form of leverage of our generation.
Yep.
And you can use content to build community around interests or topics. We've done that. We've started building community, but I want to build a tech product. And so how could we, you know, build a tech product to serve our community and listen to our community and identify, hey, what are some of the problems? And this is going to be like really simplified talking about it in hindsight, but I'll kind of tell you the evolution. So we had the Oil and Gas Startups podcast, which the industry was using as a research tool to discover new technological solutions. So our first tech product that we built was called the Bullpen. And it was actually as simple as a page on our website where you'd go on it. It was kind of like Crunchbase for oil and gas tech companies. We had like 25 tech companies on there. And so you could click on Combo Curve, who at the time was Inside Petroleum, and you click on their profile, and it would have a high quality 4K demo that they shot in our office. And it would have all this information on their company. And it was this tech discovery portal, and it was extremely valuable. I actually just found out, you know, we did that 5 years ago. I found out like sometime last year that a company was acquired. And the only reason that transaction happened is because their acquirer found them from the Bullpen. Yeah. And that actually saved our company because Tudor Pickering Holt, an investment bank, wanted to get in energy technology, and they sponsored us $70,000 for 6 months. And that kept the lights on. And so we built that, and we went to the community, and it's like, hey, how can we make this like more valuable so that we could actually make it a commercial product and charge companies for it? And I'll never forget a conversation that I had with a friend. He's like, man, it'd be really cool if I could talk to other E&P, other oil and gas engineers about these technologies. What he wanted was threads and forums. And he's like, we have data sharing agreements with 20 other oil and gas companies in our county, but we have no way to talk to them.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then off the back of that, I started seeing posts on Twitter. And I remember this production engineer, he makes a tweet and he's like, hey, I have a lot of iron carbonate buildup in my saltwater disposal well. Does anyone know why that is? And 2 other production engineers came in and gave really technical, valuable answers. And then 2 days later, all that information was just lost out into the ether. I was like, why do we not have a platform where oil and gas professionals can come, have conversations, ask questions, share information, build their network, and then we'll index those conversations so they can be searched and queried in the future? It didn't exist. And you looked for parallels, in the tech industry. You had Stack Overflow, where software developers could come ask questions about their code. The community would give answers, and then Stack Overflow would index those answers so that if anyone ever asked that question again, they could find answers to it. And so that was the initial idea for Collide, was to build this community knowledge sharing platform where these conversations could take place, which if we go back to our evolution of the internet through Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, Web 3 is going to be highly verticalized niche communities that have both digital elements and in-person real life elements. Humans crave human interaction and face-to-face interaction, especially this industry. It's very much a handshake industry. And so we knew that, and we're like, hey, we're going to build this energy specific platform and community, and we're going to combine both the digital elements that'll fuel it and real life elements. And where we got the name Collide from is when we did our events for our community, our in-person events. Going back to, you remember I told you that oil and gas was super stuffy, the events were stuffy. It was always awkward to be at some big conference center, convention center, and like walk up to a group of, 3 people
wearing suits
and like talk
stiffed up.
Dude, I'm the most extroverted person ever, and I can't do that. Like, it sucks. And so our whole thesis around events was, how could you remove that friction? How could you make an event like a party and then inject content into that? And the whole premise for us was to make an environment where you could have collisions. And the collisions between those people were the catalyst for ideas, collaborations, and opportunities. And that's where we got the name Collide from, is that we wanted people to have those same collisions in a digital platform.
And I think as well, like you said, X, LinkedIn, like something super valuable gets posted and then it just gets buried in the feed the next day. Yeah. But I've noticed just from using Collide personally, like I'm a non-technical person that is still learning the industry and like technical knowledge. And there's no better place that I've experienced than Collide to be able to like level up my knowledge in different verticals within energy.
Yeah. If you look at when I wrote the original white paper for Collide back in 2021, I said that the biggest problem that the industry deals with is a knowledge retention and transfer problem.
Yeah.
And that has several different facets to it. So one facet is what you just explained, is like, hey, there's a lot of people that come into the industry and it's like, where do you begin to learn?
Well, that's one thing. Luckily, Digital Wildcatters has had content, podcasts, like Energy 101, like explaining it to the basics. And like, if that content wasn't there, I don't know where the fuck I would go to learn about energy, which is...
Yeah, that's, and that was
which is a problem, right? If you want to...
Did you go back to when I was 19, 20 years old? When I would take my days off, I was trying to spend my days off learning as much as I could about oil and gas. I wanted to know everything about the business. And I remember I ordered this course. I paid like $1,000 for this course, and it got delivered to me on a thumb drive. And I plugged this thumb drive in my computer, and it was like super shitty animated voiceovers, like really boring. And that was the only way to learn back then. And so that's one facet is you have new generation coming in, you have people coming in from other industries. How can you shorten that learning curve and give them access to good, it can't just be technical content. It has to be entertaining content. It has to be high quality content. And you go look at any of the content that we've ever produced, it is high quality. And we take a lot of pride in that. And you have to, like, we care a ton about design and user experience. But then if you look at the professionals that are in the industry, there's also several different facets. So the gray hairs, the boomer generation, are leaving and taking a ton of tribal knowledge, taking tribal knowledge with them. And that's scary. It's a huge problem. Then within companies, you have issues with departments being siloed. Drilling doesn't talk to completions. Completions doesn't talk to production. And so there's information loss in there. You have information loss in the M&A process. You go buy a company or you buy an asset. There's so much information that is lost in that data transfer process. So the industry just really deals with a information retention and transfer problem. And that's what we built Collide AI for. And so we always knew that, hey, if we built this community knowledge sharing platform, we're going to be able to use AI to be able to search that really quickly. The problem is that before ChatGPT 3.5 came out, AI wasn't good and it was expensive. You know, a story I like to tell is we were using AI on our podcast back in like 2018, 2019 to transcribe our podcast or to try to transcribe it.
Right.
And it was only about 70% accurate and it was expensive. And so there was a big oil and gas company back then called Anadarko. And every time Anadarko would get mentioned on our podcast, the transcript would say Banana Darko. And so like, I always have it imprinted in my brain. Like that's how I remember them is like, it's Banana Darko.
Yeah.
And so like we knew like, hey, there's going to be some big AI elements that we can do on the back of this, but the technology was not democratized for a company of our size and resources to use. Then ChatGPT 3.5 comes out. And I mean, obviously opens up the floodgates for the entire AI industry.
Right.
But when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, I saw several different problems with large language models. And actually, it wasn't even several different problems. I saw several different ways that the world was going to fundamentally change. One of those ways was that the way that data and content was stored around the internet was about to change forever. So used to, we had open internet. You know, like really the golden age of the internet, in my opinion, was like 2006 to 2009. And because, dude, you could find whatever you wanted and it was free. It wasn't paywalled.
It wasn't junk.
Dude, AI. It wasn't junk. It was high quality stuff, like golden age of the internet. And when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, they were already really good at coding. Why were they good at coding? Because they were siphoning off all the content from Stack Overflow. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, Stack Overflow just had all the value extracted out of them by AI. I was like, this is going to change the way that platforms like Reddit and Twitter deal with their API. And it did. They went and made changes and commercialized those APIs. I was like, Google search is potentially at risk. And that's when I was like, okay, that's interesting from a data and content storage perspective, fundamentally changes how the internet works. And then what I saw was that large language models largely were unusable at the enterprise level. You know, they were really good at generating answers, but they couldn't tell you how that answer was generated. They couldn't give you a source. So they were like a black box. You also had tons of problems with hallucinations. Still have problems with hallucinations today. I just made a post today on Twitter about Claude looking through one of my legal contracts and it just completely made up some person's name, like that does not exist in that document. Still have problems with hallucinations. You had problems with data security and privacy. And so I saw these problems and about 2 years ago, discovered a new technology, a new framework called RAG. It stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And what I liked about RAG was it could mitigate a lot of these problems that I was seeing with LLMs. And the whole idea was, hey, if we can make this energy specific knowledge base. So if we scrape and take in all of this energy content that's publicly available, whether it's videos, podcasts, blogs, articles, earnings calls, whatever, bring that in. If we can work with third party content, like, you know, we have a partnership with Society of Petroleum Engineers to bring in their abstracts. And then we have all the conversations that happen in our forums. It's like, hey, you could ask Collide AI, hey, I'm having issues with this electric submergible pump and 4.5-inch casing. Collide AI gives you an answer and then it gives you sources. And those sources may be a book, it may be a white paper, or maybe a conversation or a podcast that happened in Collide. And so that was the idea. And what we ended up doing was taking that search technology and deploying it at the enterprise level within some really large oil and gas companies on their internal data. And so the problem that this industry deals with is that engineers spend 30 to 40% of their time searching for information because 90% of the information lives in PDFs and CSVs and legacy.
From like 20 decades ago.
Yeah. And so they spend hours and days trying to find information. And so what we're doing with Collide AI is we're taking all their data and content and indexing it and making it to where their engineers can find information in seconds, not days. And then we started building automated workflows on top. That search is really the foundational level, but we started building these automated workflows on top of it. And so, and this is all community driven. You know, like we think that, it's not even that we think, we have a deep belief that we will build the best AI products and models for the energy industry based off of the data that we have access to and the community that we have access to. So that's really the thesis here, was using content to build community and then using community to build the best AI models that we can.
And I think as well, I saw one of your recent tweets about like enterprise AI is fucking hard, and most people in Silicon Valley would say, like, this, like you said, we'll test it out for 3.5 months, and like, I don't want to look through like,
which is such a joke, like
10,000 well logs and try and like John was just showing me earlier, he was trying to transcribe documents from like 2000, and like the handwriting is literally, I mean,
yeah, you come sit down with John and like sits next to him through our data pipelines, and like you realize how non-trivial this stuff is to process that.
Thousands and thousands of documents.
Yeah, our first pilot that we did was 20,000 PDFs. You're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages of technical documentation that we're indexing. And you know, the post that you're referencing, just for anyone that's listening to this, was a founder from Silicon Valley talking about how they were pivoting their business after 3 months because enterprise AI is really hard and there's too many edge cases and all this. And I laughed. Like when I laughed, like I cannot imagine like 3 months. Like, dude, you're not doing shit in 3 months at the enterprise level. Yeah. You know, once we'd built our core technology, we spent 12 months in the market just doing R&D of, hey, where is the best use cases for our technology? You know, what are the 5 applications that we can build and extrapolate across the market? And I mean, it's going to take you 3 months minimum to get a pilot, get all the paperwork done for it. And so, and I love that, dude. I love businesses that are hard, that are capital intensive, because that's barrier to entry. Like I don't want businesses that people can just spin up and start. But Silicon Valley, look, the last decade or so has been very uninspiring to me. Oh, cool. You're making another CRM. You're making another email productivity tool. Cool, dude. GPT wrapper. Yeah, dude. Like this shit's not inspiring to me. And what we're building is hard, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of brain power. I mean, you come here and I mean, the intellectual density that we're building on our team is crazy. And, you know, I think another thing about us too is like, my belief is that these AI platforms, you have to have domain expertise. Like you have to come from oil and gas to deeply understand these problems. And you know, you look at some of those documents that John will show you, and you know, it's funny, we're looking at bringing on a big time AI engineer from I'll just say that I'm stealing them from Zuckerberg, and I'm like, I'm really proud of that.
Are you paying the 100 million fees?
Not 100 million, but these people are not cheap, I'll tell you that much. And you know, I showed him a document, and it was a document of a drill out. And I mean, got every oil and gas acronym in the book. So it's just pure numbers and pure acronyms.
Written and shitty handwriting.
And I show him to that. I'm like, hey, can you tell me what this is? He's like, dude, I have no clue. Even John came and asked me like, hey, what is this? And I'm like, oh, they're doing a drill out, and they had to drill out 2 plugs and cement, and then they moved the rig over, all this. And you can only know those things if you spent 10 years doing those things. And so we just think that that's where our competitive advantage is. If you look at our moat, it's I posted that meme the other day. It's like, what's your moat? I'm like, I am the moat.
I'm the fucking moat.
Yeah. I do. Like, I do believe that. That wasn't just a meme for fun. I do believe that.
That's what you told your investors.
Yeah.
I'm the moat.
You know, it's funny. Mercury Fund had told me that they had pretty much made the investment on the premise that they weren't willing to bet against me. And so that was the highest form of compliment that they think I'm batshit crazy. They're like, this is why we funded you.
This is why we backed you up.
But you look at it, you know, what are our real competitive advantages outside of our people? It's data moats. We think that we're going to have the most robust energy data repository in the world, and we'll be able to use that to build AI models. It's network effects. So network effects from our community and the Collide platform, and then network effects as we bring on more companies and they potentially allow us to anonymize their data. We'll have even more data.
Open source, like data sharing.
Yeah. And a lot of our clients are already giving us a nod that they'd be willing to do that. The third is the domain expertise from our team, and then the fourth is that this industry software is just really sticky. So once you get in, you're in, because the switching cost is too high. And so that's really how we kind of view the business from a commercial perspective. And obviously, AI is all the craze right now. There's a lot of froth, a lot of buzzwords around it, but what we're working on are real complex data problems is what we're working on. So yeah, I'm glad that you got to sit next to John and see some of the things that he's working
I tell
through.
you, that shit is not for the weak. So, and I know there's probably no one else in the world out there like solving this very niche, complex problem with the same level of expertise and like experience.
Yeah, and relentlessness, and like, you gotta be crazy to do some of the things that we're doing, and we're doing it. What's cool is I had a oil and gas company here last week or the week before, and they were the first ones to ever use our version 1 of Collide. And version V1 was not good; it was shitty, but it kind of got started putting an idea in your head of what it could be. And sometimes I had a flash of brilliance. I'm like, damn, I can't believe it got that answer. That was awesome. And so I got to give them a demo of where we're at now with our enterprise product. And they're like, this is cool. Y'all have made so much progress since then. And so, that's what's hard about building these things is you got to start somewhere. And you just have to start, and then you have to build. And I think like what's really important for companies our stage that are founder led is like you have to sell people on a vision, and they start believing in you. And one thing I love about oil and gas, like I really love this industry. Like I have such a deep affinity for it. And one thing that I love is the people. And I'll tell you that there are people at large companies that want us to win, and they have no economic incentive for that. And it's just really kind of out of pureness of their hearts of they want to support oil and gas people that are building technology, and they want us to win. And so, I think that that's something that cannot be articulated enough, is that the people in this industry are great, and they want others to win. So
it's pretty crazy, the community. Like for me entering the industry, like people say it's tight knit, and then like it's only my third time in Houston, and I see it every time I come. It's like everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
which is great. I don't think there's many industries out there in the world like it, but the problem that you're trying to solve is super hard. And I think you mentioned as well, it's super capital intensive. Like you have to keep investing heavily back into the product and continuously improving it.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's next on the roadmap for Collide over the next 6 months to a year? Like where are you guys headed?
Yeah. One, just to back it up real quick and talk about the community aspect. The industry is it's a very, I don't like saying old good boy network anymore, because there's a ton of women obviously in the industry now, but that's what it is. It's a handshake driven industry. And you think it's like that in Houston, go out to Midland. They call it the Midland Mafia for a reason. You go to Oklahoma City's even tighter knit, and in all great places. And then, what's next for us? Yeah, this is a business like this is capital intensive. Really my job at this point all revolves around storytelling.
Right.
And so I have really three main components to my job as the CEO of this company. The first is to raise capital and make sure we don't run out of money. That's sales.
Yeah.
It's to sell our product to enterprises, so pure sales. And then it's recruiting to get the best people here, which is sales.
Selling the vision.
Yeah, I can't, hopefully when this podcast drops, I've closed a deal with this AI engineer that's going to come over. But I was talking to the CTO of an EMP. He's like, how are you getting people like that to come over? And I was like, hey, look, the reason that I will be extremely wealthy someday is because my best talent is convincing really smart people to come do stupid things with me. And like, that's at the end of the day,
that's an amazing philosophy.
That's it. Yeah. And so to build this, the AI industry is moving so quickly. I mean, weekly, new technologies, new methodologies,
agents, all these things,
so many things. And so that's our job, is to stay on top of that. And we will continuously have a heavy R&D effort to stay on top of that as we build out our core technology. And really for us, 80% of our enterprise AI is productized. But as we move into clients, there's 20% that's custom implementation and integration. And so we're not SaaS, we're true enterprise software. And so that takes really built out customer success teams, takes out, 4 deployed engineering teams. And then all the money that we're going to spend on compute and R&D on our technology, like these are all expensive things. And you look at the people I have, like I get the benefit of working at the intersection of oil and gas and AI, and everyone in both of these industries makes a lot of money. And so you have to pay these, and my philosophy is I want the smartest people and I want to overcomp them compared to market. And so I always that's how I attracted some of the best talent, is not only selling them on the mission and the vision and the importance of building this technology. I think this technology that we're building is one of the most important things for society to solve the world's energy crisis and bring affordable energy to the world. But then I pay them fucking well too, on top of it. And so, for us over the next 6 months, and don't hold me to this because everything changes sometimes daily here.
Right. For sure.
But we're going to go raise a Series A. So, we've raised $12 million in capital up to this point. We'll probably raise another $100 million over the next couple of years. We're going to go raise a Series A. I'm not going to disclose how much that's going to be, but it's going to be a pretty substantial round. We were planning on doing that in the beginning of 2026, but I think that's going to probably accelerate up the timeline, given some of these AI hires that we're making, and also given our pipeline from commercialization. I mean, if one thing's been proven out true is that me and Chuck are really good at selling AI, and so our pipeline is pretty stout. And so really our focus is hey, we are getting into all of these energy companies. Now it's about creating a world-class product that wows them on day one. Like I care about time to value. And I want day one for them to have a holy shit moment with our product. And so that's where we're at now, is deploying into these companies and making sure that our product is valuable to them. And so with that, we'll be building up our customer success teams, our 4 deployed engineering teams, and then our internal AI team, and then raising a Series A. So we're going to be extremely busy over the next 6 months.
I think the most important question is, when are we going to win Chuck his private jet back? And when are you going to smoke the pound of weed out of his private jet?
The sad story of Chuck Yates, has to sell his private jet and meets me. And, I've told Chuck this, but, if there's ever a book written about me, there needs to be a chapter dedicated to Chuck because, Chuck, I owe him a ton. He changed my life. And Chuck, has personally invested somewhere around $2 million into our company. And I mean, he was cutting $500K checks when, we couldn't make payroll in 2 weeks. And Chuck saw a vision, and I would say even more just had belief in us as a team before there was a business model, before there was material traction. And I think Chuck is going to look very smart here in a few years, but that is always Chuck's reminder. He's counting on me to get his private jet back. And so, which I've made him a deal that him and I will co-own it, and we'll get to share it. But if this is what I love about capitalism, is that if you build something that is valuable enough, you should have aligned incentives to have those economic outcomes. And I think what we've built, we have so many aligned incentives across the industry, across our community, that this is going to become a very powerful platform that only continues to grow over time.
Man, Chuck is a dime a dozen, and I'm excited just to look back on these clips and podcasts when the vision is finally realized.
Yeah, no, Chuck's a special dude, heart of gold. He's a goofy guy, but he's one of the sharpest finance guys that you'll meet, and just really glad to have him in our corner.
Yeah. Last question for you, man. I want to hear, I think you told me this before, but I want to hear about the origin story of Fracslap.
Yeah.
And when you're getting a patent on the name.
Yeah. So my original Twitter handle back in 2016 was called Oil God. And it's just what it was. I don't know. I don't have any justification or reasoning for it. It was just Oil God. And EFT starts building up. And I kind of had this thought where I was like, I need a new Twitter handle. Like I don't like Oil God. It comes off as very pretentious. But I didn't know what to like change it to. Anyways, there's this reporter for the Society of Petroleum Engineers, and he writes this article about this event that they did, and the reservoir engineer gave a presentation, and he was talking about frac kits. So a frac kit is when you have one well and you have another well next to it, and you go to frac that well and you interfere with that well that was next to it. That's called a frac kit. And his presentation was about how there's actually a spectrum of frac hits. You have frac punches, frac kicks, and frac slaps. And I was like, dude, frac slap. I was like, that goes so fucking hard.
Yeah.
And so I just changed my handle to frac slap.
Yeah.
And I have no idea why that took off or why that stuck. But I mean, it's become my name. My kids don't call me dad. They call me frac slap. You know, you'll hear Chuck. Chuck will call me frac. You know, it's funny. I was hanging out with a billionaire at a ranch the other day, and, you know, we're with this family, and I was like outside, I was looking at something, and he called my name. He's like, Collin. And I answered him, but he didn't hear me. He's like, Fracslap. And I was like, yeah. He's like, see? He's like, he doesn't even answer to his real name. He answers to Fracslap. And so Fracslap has like just consumed me, and it's become who I am. And so I prefer that people call me by my proper name of Fracslap.
I'm never calling you Collin again.
Yeah, dude, you shouldn't. Like, no,
Frack
it's
only.
like, yeah, it's just just Fracslap or frack for short. That's my nickname. But actually, I've actually looked at the process of legally changing my name to Fracslap. First name Frack, last name Slap. just for the memes.
Would your kids bring on Slap as their second name?
I don't think so. That's actually the only reason that like makes me like not want to do it. But I was like, if I raised like, I don't know, if I did charity, like, hey, $1 million and I'll change my legal name to Fracslap, I would do that in a heartbeat. So maybe we'll do that sometime.
So when you're not selling AI enterprise software, you're roasting Anons on X.
Yeah, I try to like spend less time on it.
Yeah.
Because I actually have a lot of important shit to do in my life.
Well, it's marketing, right? It's still important.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But you know, when we're raising our last round of capital and they're going through due diligence, they ran a background check and it pulled up every tweet where I've ever said fuck. And so it's like 100 pages of my tweets. And they're just like sitting there. And they had this huge investment committee meeting, like going over my tweets. I wish I was in the room because I'd be like, dude, that's a good tweet. Like, tell me that's not funny.
That's incredible.
And so, but really, it's like, I hate Twitter Anons.
Yeah.
Like, honestly,
bots.
like if I was president, I'd put them in camps. Like, I hate these people. They're just incels. And like, I get so much pleasure and enjoyment out of just absolutely dunking on them. And I think like the problem with me is like, you know, I've trained mixed martial arts for 10 years. Like,
right.
I don't just have Twitter fingers. Like, what are you going to do? You going to come whoop me? And so like, I'm kind of a bully on the internet.
Yeah.
Like always, like I laughed, like I was going to make this one meme. Like, this isn't a real story. It's just this made up story in my head, but it's like my anger management therapist, like, hey, how do you vent right now and deal with your anger? And I'd be like, you know, bashing Anons on Twitter and just the therapist, like there's this gif on Twitter where it's like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah.
But I was like, that's how I like, that's my vent. That's how I get out. But yeah, I've been trying to put my time into productive things. So now with like Twitter Anons, like every once in a while I'll let off on one, but I just kind of ignore them now and put my energy into positive things and making the world a better place. And I'll turn my attention back to the Twitter Anons once we've hit critical mass with Collide.
Fair. I mean, you're still putting out tons of valuable content. And I think going back to the whole theme of storytelling, like the reason Collide is what it is today and how you're sat here with, you know, just coming up to Series A is because of storytelling. Right from the beginning of Digital Wildcatters to the evolution of Collide as an energy community platform to now AI enterprise. Like, it all comes back down to storytelling.
I think storytelling is the most important thing in the world. And it doesn't matter if you're a business and a company, it doesn't matter if you're an individual, everything comes down to storytelling. It doesn't matter if you're selling a product, if you're raising capital, if you're trying to get a girlfriend, it's all storytelling. And my biggest piece of advice when it comes to storytelling is simplifying. And so many people get lost in, like, I'm going to use this like in the context of raising capital or selling a product. so many people get lost in the details, and when they should really be removing 80% from the story and focusing on the core elements. So like what I always tell people is, if you go into our office, when you walk out, you'll see this painting of the bulls by Picasso. Yeah. Like I beat this into people's head. The painting of the bulls is this, it's this framework by Picasso where, in his first frame, he draws a very realistic bull, tons of detail. Next frame, he removes a little bit of detail. Next frame, he removes a little bit of detail until the final frame, I think it's the ninth frame, it's just a stick figure. So it's got a line for the body, line for the legs, a line for the head. The funny thing is he left the balls.
Complexity.
But the whole premise was just capturing the core essence of the bull. And I used that, and I didn't come up with this as a philosophy for design. It was actually, I pulled that from Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs did this, and you can see it in Apple's product design. You look at a computer mouse. Computer mouse back in the day had 2 clickers, had all these angles, had a roller ball, tons of parts. Now you look at an Apple mouse and it's just one smooth curvature. And so that really kind of embodies that design philosophy. But I use that same philosophy for storytelling. And I've gotten so much better at raising capital over the years. And I will tell you that the simpler I made my story, the more money I raised. So really just like focusing on, hey, what are those core elements? So if you're a business, hey, what are those core elements of your story and your value proposition, and really hone in on those and don't get lost in the sauce.
And I think the main challenge for oil and gas as such a technical, complicated industry is storytelling and simplifying the message. And there's not an industry in the world that needs better storytelling than oil and gas. And I think we're starting to make some headways, but there's a long way to go.
The industry is technical and scientifically driven, heavy engineering. But the actual problem is that the industry is full of engineers that suck at storytelling.
Right.
Like a lot of these concepts can be simplified. And like when we sit here and talk AI, like I'm not getting lost in the weeds of the intricacies of our data pipelines and our embedding models and how we're extracting information out of documents. Did I talk about that once? No, I didn't. I just went straight to the point of, hey, what are we doing for companies? And the problem that you see in this industry is that the industry is full of heavy engineering and engineering minds. And one thing that and I'm not dogging engineers at all, but one thing engineers are great at is overcomplicating things. And so like to relate with engineers, what I show them is the modern day painting of the bulls by Picasso is actually the Raptor engine by SpaceX. And there's a popular picture that came out last year, and it's V1, V2, V3 of the Raptor engine. And the first version was extremely complex, millions of different parts and connections. And the version that they're on now is just one unified exterior piece, like so clean. And you got to use that same concept in your storytelling of hey, how do I actually articulate, the value proposition of what we do and not get lost in the technical details.
Yeah. Last off, man, where can people find more about Fracslap, Collide, and get involved?
I mean, where I'm most active is on Twitter. So you can find me, Fracslap. You can find me on LinkedIn, Fracslap. You can find me on TikTok as Fracslap. Find me on Instagram as Fracslap. And find me everywhere on the internet as Fracslap. Probably even in your little favorite niche corner of the internet that you didn't even think I know existed. I'm there as Fracslap. I'm everywhere.
On Collide, Fracslap?
I'm on Collide, obviously, so you can find me on there. Our website's collide.io. A great place to kind of like check out some of the things that we're working on. And yeah, if you're interested in learning about the energy business or getting into the energy business, you should get on Collide. Sign up, it's free. You got to go through an application process. But if you're not from the energy industry, on your application, put, hey, I'm interested in learning about the industry and potentially want to work in the industry, and you can get in and start accessing content and learning.
No Twitter Anons allowed though. You need to be a real person.
Yeah, no Anons allowed. Yep.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
great chatting.
Thank you, dude.
I've been seeing all these boys talking about getting in the oil field. 110-degree heat, freezing rain, some men's work. You ain't about that life.